All right. Thank you for joining the Partners in Disability vote this evening for the Conversation 360, the vote in disability. This session is being recorded and will be posted to the Disability SA website, YouTube channel, and social media platforms following tonight's conversation. We are here tonight with candidates running in the District 6 City Council race, which will be held on Saturday, May 1st. The deadline to register to vote is Thursday, April 1st. If you do not live in District 6 and would like to move to a different room, please select the Leave Room option and volunteers in the main room will assist you. We will begin with pre-submitted questions and then entertain questions from the floor if time allows. For this district, we anticipate being able to get through 11 to 12 questions. Let me remind the candidates of the forum guidelines, which were emailed in advance, and emphasize that responses directed at other candidates or in reference to other candidates will not be tolerated. You will receive a courtesy warning, but will be removed if perpetuated. Now let's go ahead and get to know our candidates. First, you will each receive 2 minutes to introduce yourselves. Include why you are running for office and why the disability vote is important to you. Again, you'll have 2 minutes, and we're going to start with Mr. Is it Baker?
Becker.
Becker.
A is silent.
Awesome, Mr. Becker.
Yeah, my name is Chris Becker. I'm running for City Council District 6. I've lived in the district for 13 years, San Antonio for 20. I was born and raised in Florida, Texas, a couple hours southeast of here on the coast. The main reason I'm running, the main thing that got me into it was the government's reaction to the pandemic. And the reason the disability vote is important to me is this little lady over my left shoulder. That's my niece. If she heard I was not being appropriate or not doing what I could to give them a more equal life, make sure that they have equal access to everything, I'd never hear the end of it. And she'd probably stop saying she wants to keep coming to Uncle Chris's house. So that's why this is important to me. That's all I have for the opening.
All right, awesome. And next we have Miss, is it Havrada?
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me tonight. My name is Melissa Cabello Havrada. I'm very grateful to be running for re-election to District 6. I'm just making sure everybody can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I was born and raised in District 6, and I decided to run for office to give back to this community that raised me. I'm a disability attorney by trade, and I value the opportunity to work towards equality for all people. On my first term in council, I focused on tangible investments in public safety, infrastructure maintenance and improvement, workforce training, business development, and accessible and responsive city services. I decided to run for office. It's based on something that happened, when I was a little girl, and I was with my grandfather, who was not a formally educated man, but we were taking a walk in his neighborhood, and he was on the street, and I was on the grass. And I remember kicking at the grass and then looking up at my grandfather and asking him why don't you have sidewalks in your neighborhood? And my grandfather looked down at me and said, "Porque no les importa." They don't care about us. And even as a little girl, that sparked a fire in me that burns to this day. It led me to become a disability attorney, and it led me to run for council. I focus on disability law because I grew up with twin cousins who are autistic and nonverbal. They're just a couple years younger than me, so we were a very close family. We did a lot of things together. And while, it was perfectly, it was my everyday life dealing with my cousins, Melanie and Mary, I was sort of didn't understand the reactions of other people. Why couldn't my cousins do the things that I could do? Why couldn't they be involved in the organizations that I was in? So I feel very grateful and honored, really, to be able to represent disabled individuals, both mentally and physically challenged, not only in my practice, in my disability practice, but every day on council. When we are talking specifically about public engagement issues, I always ask, well, what about people who have disabilities? How are we reaching out to them? It's in the beginning of my term, the city kind of stumbled over those questions sometimes, but now they know I'm going to ask it. So I'm grateful to say that I think that we've made a change just by asking those questions and knowing that they had to have an answer for it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and next we have Mr. Hernandez.
Hello, thank you for having us out here this evening. My name is Robert Hernandez. I've been in San Antonio, born and raised in San Antonio my whole life. The reason I'm running for city council, I also want to help the community, kind of want to bring common sense to the city council. Sometimes when I've always been kind of a news junkie when I watch the news, and you're like, oh, did they think of this? Did they think of that? So I want to bring that into play. Reason why the disability vote is important to me is I think the whole city should be equal to everyone. Everybody should have the same access that any person has to any service throughout the city. I think better city for everyone, and that's all I have. Sorry about.
Wonderful. All right. Now we'll move on to pre-submitted questions. This time, the order is going to change every time. We're going to start with, I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name. Is it Miss Havreda? And you'll have—
Sorry, I was muted.
No,
It's Havreda. Perfect.
Havreda.
Yes,
Awesome.
ma'am.
We'll start with this pre-submitted question. You'll have 1 minute to answer. The question is, currently, a lack of disability data impacts the ability to remove barriers for an equitable quality of life for those living with a disability. How would you work to ensure a disability identifier question is added to all city surveys, applications, and other forms where other optional demographic questions such as race and ethnicity, age, gender, LGBTQ identity, and income are collected?
Thank you for the question. And this is actually something that I've asked publicly of the city. I think we have equity surveys, as you mentioned, and it's really important when we talk about a city budget that's based on equity and all the city programs that we include equity. I think you make a really good point. We talk about race, ethnicity, LGBTQIA identity, income, and we need to look at including really everybody in this. So as much as people would want to self-identify that, we have to offer them that opportunity. And also, it's so many times being a disability attorney, I have a lot of clients who you can't just look at somebody and understand that they're disabled. So it's not something that you can identify always by just looking at somebody and physically seeing them. So having that opportunity to identify that yourself, to self-identify as a person that's being disabled, I think is very important. I think where we start is working with the city's diversity officer to ensure her department is taking into consideration the needs of the disability community. But, it's something that I don't think there's not a lot of change there. I mean, it's something that we could do pretty easily.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Hernandez.
Thank you. Data is the most important thing. So if we're not sure what we're working with, there's no way we can assist people we need to assist. I don't see how hard it would be to add a question, even a follow-up question of what the disability is, you know what I mean? So we can get a little bit more of that information. Is it physical? Is it mental? Is it something else? So I don't see it being that hard to add to all the forms that the city has. If you filled out a city form, there's a few opportunities in there that you could add that question in. Like I said, and also I would kind of want to see the census is out there. Maybe there's something we could piggyback on there. But like I said, the better data that we have, the better it is we can kind of identify problems and kind of address those problems as needed throughout the community.
All right, thank you. And then finally, we have Mr. Becker.
Can you read the exact wording of that question again, please, ma'am?
Yes, 1 moment. The question is, currently, a lack of disability data impacts the ability to remove barriers for an equitable quality of life for those living with a disability. How would you work to ensure a disability identifier question is added to all city surveys, applications, and other forms where other optional demographic questions are collected?
Just as a matter of importance, I would push it. And if I remember this question correctly, I would ask why these aren't already on there. I don't know if room on the form, if how many different disabilities were taken into consideration. But it would seem to me like something like this should maybe already be on these forms. And I would just ask why they aren't and just kind of press the issue.
Okay, awesome. Our next question is, how do you see your district office working better with our disability community on the city level? First, we'll have Mr. Hernandez and you'll have 1 minute.
Working better. So one thing I would do is make sure we have outreach to the disability community, make sure that we have interpreters there. One things I would like to see definitely being used more, especially now that we're all mobile and there's screens everywhere now. It's a little bit, I think it's a little bit easier to get definitely going at even like libraries, parks and recs, you know what I mean? That's one thing I would kind of to get the office working better to the disability community at the city level. Also push ordinance where we have those opportunities, we can kind of forward them. Even in job training, making sure that it is, how do you say it's accessible to the community, to the disability community, that they could kind of enroll in these programs. Sometimes it could be something as even getting onto a bus to get down to the library or even to the grocery store to get information on what's going on and stuff like that. So I would kind of, and of course I would have an open door policy. So thanks.
Awesome. All right, next we have Mr. Becker.
I think I'm up. No?
Oh, I am so
I think you
sorry.
already answered. It's okay.
I'm so sorry, ma'am.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
Pressure,
Well,
man.
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry. Pardon there. Nothing.
Okay. How do we see the district office working better with the disability community, right? So my office has worked with our public works department to enhance items such as crosswalk safety or wheelchair access for parts of the city that might not fall under the ADA rules. Of course, we have federal regulations, but as we know, some areas or some sites are grandfathered in. So what I do in my own district is we really look hard. We physically walk the streets. I love walking through the district and knocking on doors and talking to people. And I'm because of my professional background, and my sidewalk story, which is really why I'm here. You know, why I want to represent people that don't have a voice, is sidewalks, right? So many times you see a tree has pulled up a sidewalk, and so we identify those right away, because that, you know, it's, the city might not prioritize it because there is a sidewalk there, but we're looking at mobility. Not just because I can walk that or my neighbor can walk that doesn't mean, you know, an elderly person or somebody who has other mobility issues can walk that. So you know, that sidewalk. We also look where we don't have sidewalks, where we don't have cut-ins, you know, to onto curb cuts. To make sure that people that are in wheelchairs can get on those sidewalks. So it's really identifying, and unfortunately, it's really just kind of the older neighborhoods that don't have sidewalks, have broken sidewalks, is what we're focusing on.
All right. And did everyone answer that question? Just want to make sure.
I did.
Okay, perfect. The next question we have, we're going to start with Mr. Becker. And let me pull up this question document. Again, you'll have 1 minute. The question is, currently via paratransit services cover only those living within 3/4 mile of a traditional bus line, and ride sharing options are not accessible. Dependable transportation is a huge part of the difference in getting and keeping a job and or getting an education to get the qualifications for employment. What legislation, policy, or use of city resources would you champion to influence the expansion of accessible, affordable, and efficient transportation options for those living with disabilities outside the mandated VIA service areas?
Outside the mandated areas?
Yes.
I guess first I would look and see which VIA routes are somewhat underutilized. Look at maybe pressing them somewhat, limiting, downsizing them, for lack of better words, and redirecting some of the resources. And if it's not currently in VIA's mandate, I suppose look at VIA's mandate and consider expanding that, depending on just how many people lack this kind of transportation.
All right, thank you. And then next, we will have Ms. Evrata?
Thank you. I actually think exactly the opposite. I think VIA we need to work more diligently to expand the service area. Now that they'll be receiving an additional sales tax monies after the November election, this is an item that I, as an elected official, need to hold them accountable to achieve. I have regular meetings with VIA. There are parts of our district that use VIA every day. You know, they need it to get to work, they need it to get to school. And so it's really important that we are using that system and like you said, outside 1604. So District 6 actually is outside 1604, but also the incorporated areas. Their overall goal is to expand routes and via link to increase their service area as soon as possible. But we've had a lot of conversations about the paratransit system. So I want to just make sure it's in line with their bus service and we're expanding it.
All right, awesome, thank you. And then finally, we have Mr. Hernandez.
So I also believe it should be expanded. One of the things is the city's growing so fast and we don't have a good public transportation system, not just for the disability, just for everybody. If we can kind of get our system up, then it's better for everybody. As far as the tax, I would, so Prop A, I would kind of look in there too. Maybe we could use that money for some other service as far as disability service. If I'm not correct, I think the tax money doesn't start coming in for a couple of years. I think the first it goes to the work essay. I would look into that to kind of make sure that it does have the funds that it needs for the VIA trans and stuff like that. But I don't think I don't think cutting back service on VIA would be beneficial to anyone. I would kind of look to see what we can do as far as getting them more funding, because I think transportation is going to be an issue, not just for disability, but just for everybody in general.
All right, thank you. All right, our next question is, how do you see yourself being a role model for kids and adults with disabilities, especially looking for work, trying to build trust in adults? Tell us a little bit about how you see yourself as a role model and a leader who is paving the way towards independence for youth and adults with disabilities. All right, and I believe we're starting with Ms. Evrata.
Thank you. Of course, you know, my profession, I think, and I have children who I represent, and it's a passion of mine, really, especially with children, to encourage them and talk about maybe some of the own challenges in my life that I had to get through in order to be where I am now. And when I mean that, just, you know, how I had to fight for my education, you know, how I was elected. And so I try to use my own life to try to tell them how you can get through obstacles. I also have brought in people that share that disability. If I have a child that has a disability, if there's an adult I know that shares that disability, to come and talk with them and tell them how they got through their struggles in life. Because, you know, the phrase representation matters, really, it means something to me. And to see an adult that has your same challenge and what they've been through, it's very important to be able to visualize yourself doing that same thing or something like that.
Right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Next, we'll have Mr. Hernandez.
I guess just kind of showing that you care. I think showing that you care, supporting at all times, and walking sometimes with them. And as far as through the struggles and stuff, showing that yes, it's okay to be scared. You know what I mean? It's okay to be scared. It's okay not to kind of be afraid of what's going to happen next, but showing that yes, you can get through this, and also kind of focusing on their past, and like, you've come this far, you can go a little bit further. You know what I mean? If you made it over here, you can keep going. How would I show leadership? Just by being there, just by showing that I can do this, you can do this. It's going to be, everybody can do this, and the tough situations are what makes us strong.
All right, and finally, Mr. Becker.
You know, there's no demographic that's more important or more innocent or vulnerable than kids, regardless of disability or not. They're the ones that get my attention first and foremost, starting with my daughters, my nieces and nephews. And I would tell them that, to get over the apprehension, it's worth it because the reward is there if you just take that step and push forward. And I would hold up my niece as an example who she attacks things and she gets after it. She owns it, and because her mother is instilled in her and has fought for equal inclusion, equal access, and just to say, you know what, you're just differently able. There's no reason you can't do that. So I would kind of lean on her as an example.
We're moving on to question 6. We'll start with Mr. Hernandez. The question is, what is being done to educate the disabled population about voting? Each of you should share where you see opportunities for partnering with the county to work toward increased voter turnout from the disability community.
I think this forum is one of the things that is kind of educating voters. Also, us being here is kind of showing that your vote does count. I mean, I think if we get out in front of more people, and when the pandemic over, more in public, more of these kind of at libraries, I kind of miss being interacting with people. I kind of love being in libraries and kind of talking to people and stuff like that. But I think forums like this, showing, and when we show up, me and all the other candidates and of course the councilwoman, it shows that your vote does matter. And I think if we can kind of let them know, like, hey, the people are going to be here. The people that are asking for your votes are going to be here. It does kind of show that education in the sense that it is reaching somewhere.
Mr. Becker?
I would let them know that voting is important, but it's also important to be an informed voter. And forums like this are important. Just to let them know which jurisdiction votes when and why this jurisdiction is important, why that one is important. Just mainly to be an informed voter. That's why I got into teaching, because it was frustrating to see, by virtue of the outcomes, so many uninformed voters going into the voting booth. Just tell them that there's a responsibility that comes with voting, and to own that responsibility. And it's empowering. It's the knowledge to go in there and vote. Just to be informed and to vote for everybody's freedom to go about their way and just respect others as they do.
All right, Ms. Zavrata.
I'm sorry, would you mind repeating the question?
Yes, of course. One moment. What is being done to educate the disabled population about voting? Each of you should share where you see opportunities for partnering with the county to work toward increased voter turnout from the disabled community.
Thank you for the question. I'm sorry I didn't hear my office mate, my doggy was barking, so I apologize. But well, so one of the things that I do is go out and speak with groups. I mean, right now they're virtual, right? But like there's associations for like epilepsy, you know, different kind of groups that I'll go out and speak to. And this was actually even before I was elected, to try to increase the vote, to try to help them to understand that again, you know, representation matters. And if the person that you want to be there is going to represent you, then you need to go out and have your voice heard. So going and speaking to different groups as much as we can, even virtually, speaking in schools, because honestly, it starts there. So many times I'm asked to read to a group, and it's talking, and I always end up with, when you grow up, we're all going to vote, you know, just that kind of little, just planting that seed, even though it's here and there, it matters. And so I'm really grateful to get invited to those groups and have the opportunity to spread the word. It's also really important to be a registrar, to be able to register people to vote. So when you see them out there, you can register them to vote right then and there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we'll move on to question 7. The question is, employment is difficult to obtain. What jobs are available to disabled and non-disabled people? And why are jobs hard to get right now? With 13.2% of San Antonians living with a disability, we'd like to hear from each of you your thoughts on some targeted efforts you would put into place to ensure there is equitable access to the workforce development programs that are helping to elevate the education and skill sets of our residents for greater levels of employment. All right, and we will start with Ms. Evrata.
Thank you. I work with vocational experts. I bring them in to talk with individuals who are looking for employment. Vocational experts, of course, have, like you mentioned, it's for people with disabilities and people without. They need to know what skills they have that will be inserted into the workforce, but also what skills they need to learn, any kind of upskilling. We work with our nonprofit partners, of course, to increase opportunities, but also identify positions within the city and potentially the county that can be filled by disabled individuals. So we'll have a more diverse workforce. It's important that our workforce, especially within the city, is representative of the community that we represent.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Hernandez.
Of course, we're coming through the pandemic. A lot of jobs were lost during the pandemic. One of the things I would kind of push forward is for a small business program where businesses that did go under during the pandemic and that had a sustained or established foothold could ask for a loan and receive that loan to restart their businesses. How would I give access to everybody to these job programs? Is one thing is reaching out to our nonprofits, reaching out to other groups to see what clientele and what they need. I would also try to bring in groups like this and forums like this where we get the education out. So people who are needing job skills training or are looking for jobs, that they can kind of, we can funnel them into the right programs.
Mr. Becker.
The reason we have the unemployment we had over the last year because of the government's overreaction to the pandemic. We were going to have a recession probably anyway, just because people were being cautious. That was happening before the government got involved. The government compounded the problem at all levels and all across the country. As far as getting the skills to get the jobs, I would point to institutions like where I teach, Northwest Vista, and our sister Alamo colleges. There's 4 others, I think, across the city, not to mention just other vocational schools in general. Just basic jobs like being a bagger at HEB is a good place to start. Just thinking about all these options, harkening back to when you were a kid and what jobs that you have and which of those may still be around or have they evolved differently. But there are institutions out there that are specialized in doing this, and people, would need to be guided to those. They're the ones who are good at doing it. That's what they're in the business of doing.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to question 9. We'll start with Mr. Hernandez. And the question is, how are you going to educate the hearing community and general public to include clear, effective communication for the deaf, hard of hearing, and deaf-blind communities in general living in workforce in San Antonio? So, understanding there is a tremendous need for public education about various disabilities, specifically around the deaf and hard of hearing community, we'd like each of you to spend a minute outlining how you would go about creating awareness for and advancing public attitudes about disability in those who are deaf, hard of hearing, or have other communication barriers within your district.
Well, education program, you said education is the kind of the top thing. One thing, just kind of show examples of situations that somebody who has fine hearing would not realize that it's something that somebody who has hard of hearing was having a hard time with. Example is somebody who goes to the store and they have their back turned, you know what I mean? And they're talking to them and they don't realize that the person that they're talking to is hard of hearing, so they don't hear them and they just kind of thinking that they're ignoring them. Just kind of they kind of show that example. Like sometimes people aren't there to ignore you, they're not aware of your situation. So education would be through that, kind of getting out, just showing examples. Kind of also just having people tell their story. I think the more people know about other people, the better they understand them.
All right, Mr. Becker.
I think being able to communicate in different languages or different ways is one of the highest forms of intelligence, in my opinion. Regardless, I mean, that's regardless of your disability or whether you have one or not. The first thing that comes to mind is I would take the opportunity to maybe learn either signing or reading lips. Actually, quick example is my sister went to a Black Sabbath concert with. She's a speech pathologist actually, and she was fascinated. I mean, I'm all with the music, but she was focused on the signing person down there. And ever since then, whenever there's a signer at a concert that I listen to, I always tell her about it. I show her that there's a signer even at a Lamb of God concert. And that's the most awesome thing, is to learn a different form of communication when it helps somebody that has an issue like hard of hearing or even blind. It's even that much more rewarding. So I would lead by example and take the opportunity to dive in and maybe try to learn one of those forms of communication myself.
All right, and finally, Ms. Havarda.
Thank you. You may have recently seen the city's initiative called Love Is, which was a public education campaign to end domestic violence. There's also been a public education campaign for people to encourage them to wear their masks. I'd like to create a messaging campaign to educate our citizens on the importance of working with our deaf and hard of hearing community, but really inclusive of all disabled citizens. As the city works towards greater equality, we have to always include the disabled community. And these campaigns have been very effective. We've really gotten a lot of calls into the District 6 office about both campaigns. And it really taught me that this is really what money well spent. You know, it's public education, it's teaching people about these different issues, but we could extend that to include the deaf and hard of hearing.
Thank you. All right, this is question 10. Again, you'll have 1 minute. And the question is, what steps can we take so that every building and sidewalk is wheelchair accessible? Please share your vision or plan for moving San Antonio toward a day when every building and sidewalk are accessible to those using mobility devices to get around our communities. And we will start with Mr. Becker.
Part of my ignorance, but I would hope that all city and county facilities, not to mention, I guess, federal and state facilities that are located in San Antonio, are already so. And if they're not, get on it to set an example. As far as private business goes, I would open my lines of communication to the disabled community to let me know if there are some private businesses that are not so equipped. I really believe in, especially this day and age of social media, I believe in public pressure, because if you hit a company, the most effective way to affect change is to hit a company's bottom line. And if it's known that they're not that accessible to all their customers, word will spread like wildfire. They'll suffer for it. So I would build somewhat of a public pressure campaign.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Ms. Havarda.
Thank you. This is a serious issue in District 6. There's so many areas where sidewalks need to be repaired or replaced. Part of the problem is the city sometimes puts the onus on the homeowner. Funding creates roadblocks and puts that burden of repair on homeowners. What we've been looking at is evaluating the funding of sidewalks. As I've mentioned, sidewalks are very important to me. And it's been difficult when somebody complains about their sidewalk, we go out and look and say, yes, absolutely, this is horrible. And the city comes back and tells me, well, it's on them, you know, so that's really not acceptable. It's something that we're looking at to create a better program for that. I personally put more of the District 6 allocated budget funding into sidewalk repairs over other projects because of it. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Hernandez.
Of course, bond issues would be one of the things to kind of look at as far as sidewalk repairs. Just kind of keep pressuring, trying to get more funding to sidewalk repairs. One of the things I would look into is also seeing where new construction or even I know there's an ordinance about new construction having to be handicap accessible, but trying to find those gaps where new, I guess we would consider it rezoning laws and stuff like that, where when they're applying for building permits or to do anything like that, where we could fill those gaps to make sure that they're handicap accessible.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to question 11. We'll start with Ms. Evrata. The question is, what do you see as the pros and cons to emphasizing the disability lens alongside the racial and poverty lenses when examining and implementing equity measures and initiatives in San Antonio?
I don't see any cons to it. I think, inclusion is inclusion, right? There's no reason not to. The pros are, getting the word out, really, understanding that including this other population that, really has not been, very oddly, given the amount of our population that is disabled, it has not been included. There's been other priorities. And so I think that that's part of my job, right, is to make sure that my passion is brought to the table. And really, District 6 feels really strongly about that. I'm grateful to say I represent a district who cares a lot about this. And so I think part of it is really just making sure that we're doing it, right? And we're walking the walk. So I mean, the pros are just to make sure that everybody's understanding and just being exposed to it and being around people so that other people understand. And and at some point, it's not even it's so inclusive that it's not seen as being inclusive. If that makes sense? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Mr. Hernandez.
Almost the same kind of answer. I think both of them just show inclusively to everyone. I mean, a better, just for general, better city. When everybody's inclusive, everybody can get to what they need to get to, where we're all equal. We see no race, we see no color, we see no disability. It's just us San Antonians. I think that's I think if we get to that spot, then we will have a better city. And I think that's one thing I'm kind of running into, trying to get the city to that position. Thank you.
And Mr. Becker?
Yeah, it's like how I've raised my daughters. It's like we're all the same for the most part. I mentioned kids earlier being the most innocent, vulnerable, disadvantaged demographic. The next one would be those who have disabilities, whether mental, emotional, or physical. Those they're just people, and like I said, I point back to my niece. She's just another niece of mine. I don't mean to diminish her, but she's just the same as the one off my other shoulder, and my daughters in that regard. We're all the same like that. We all deserve respect. Those with disabilities they merit a little more help, a little more guidance than other demographics in the city. So they should get it.
Thank you. Okay, this is question 12. There are more and more people with IDD in jail as a result of lack of funding and services to handle mental health issues, issues of childhood trauma, behavioral issues, and a wide array of special needs. Many individuals are deemed incompetent to stand trial as a result of their disability, and this keeps them trapped in the legal system indefinitely until they can prove competence, which will be difficult for someone with developmental delays. There are also a variety of special circumstances that arise for those who have communication barriers due to their disability. As the city works to evaluate the role of policing in our community, what recommendations would you make to ensure people with disabilities are getting the appropriate level of care, support, and reform at this point of entry into the criminal justice system? We'll start with Mr. Hernandez.
So Prop A is out there, so we could kind of use public funds to fund other programs. And this, I think, would be kind of the perfect situation. Also, with the funding of the police, I would love to have the police have more funding for trauma-informed care, for mental health, more officers. There's a great documentary on HBO about our mental health officers and the work that they do. The city, we need to kind of educate the city, and we're not to educate the city to understand that we're not going to arrest our way out of these problems. We need services to support these individuals. We need services to kind of wrap around them from I guess time entering service to the end and to when they do come out of housing. We need these services, and I think we need more education more education on what services are available and how we can benefit people. As far as going back to SVD, I would love to see them have more training and reform it that way.
Thank you, Mr. Becker.
He hit Mr. Hernandez hit on a couple of spots there. Knowing what services we have, what facilities specialize in this kind of care. As important it is as we know that, it's just as important as the police department does, and they should be trained to recognize when they encounter somebody, whether it's in a not pulling over, but if someone looks like they're acting erratically, they should be trained as best as possible to be able to spot a telltale sign of this disability or that. So then they can automatically triggers in their mind that they have to handle it differently. And then as soon as they get their hands around the situation, then they'll know where they can take this person. Maybe they won't be able to find out exactly where this person usually lives, but if there's a network of these places, then you should be able to find that place in short order. You just find the closest
one. All right, thank you. And Ms. Ebrada?
Thank you. You mentioned there are a number of intellectual development disorders that have been diagnosed, and I actually used to practice criminal law, and there was a young man that really taught me a lesson about this. He was arrested for criminal trespass. By the time that he was my client, I was helping indigent services, so he wasn't paying for the services, but it was number 11. He had been in front of the court 11 times for criminal trespass. I was with him 5 minutes, and I'm not a doctor, but I could understand he had a mental impairment. I took him from in front of the judge. I let him go. I soon after that worked with the DA to make sure that the criminal trespass was not decriminalized, but they weren't happening. There were more citations than arrests. So I mean, there's real things that we can do to get that changed. I think about that young man all the time. He was experiencing homelessness and sleeping on the river, and he kept getting arrested for that. So it's really devastating to see that. I think part of the solution is whatever ID people have, somehow, as we mentioned, they're self-identifying that they have this disorder or this diagnosis. And I don't just mean a state-issued ID. If it's a library card, if it's their school identification card, anything like that, I think that would go a long way.
Thank you so much. And I just want to let you all know, we just finished question 12. However, we still have until about 7:55, and we have a long list going, so we're going to keep rolling. I'm going to start back with the original order we began with. Question will begin with Mr. Becker. The question is, are there events specific to the disability community that highlight the resources available to them in your district? If so, what are these events, and do you have plans to add more? If not, do you have plans to add some?
I'm honestly not aware of such events. I am aware of something called the Buddy Walk that you all may be familiar with. I think it may be a national thing, but I've been to it a couple of times. My sister and her family are always involved. It's in my hometown of Victoria. I don't know if there's one here in San Antonio or something like that. It's just a walk for charity for Down syndrome, something like that. Sounds like a good idea, and I'd have to educate myself on the issues. A lot of what I hear. I mean, most of my experience is the Buddy Walk and stuff that my niece faces, but they live down on the coast, so it's something that I would have to educate myself here locally.
Okay, next we have Ms. Evrada.
Thank you. There's an organization called Circle of Arms. It's actually based in District 6, and they have events pretty regularly called Hiking Heroes. And they invite anyone suffering from a disability to come out and just hang out, just to be together and to talk about their experiences. It's not always an easy hike, it can be somewhat rigorous, but they don't just do hiking, they do kind of on the trails where wheelchair accessible trails. We have so many parks in the district, we have a lot to choose from. But I've been part of Any Baby Can. They have the superhero walk. I can't remember the name of it, but that's downtown. I just had a meeting with the executive director trying to bring it to District 6. But another thing that we started to do but unfortunately couldn't do because of the pandemic was we were going to have a health fair. And I wanted it to be geared towards two things: seniors and people that suffer from a disability, because there's not a lot of kind of centered events around those two with health fairs and kind of resource gathering there at that fair. But I'm hoping to have it here pretty soon, but the pandemic put a stop to us, unfortunately.
All right, Mr. Hernandez.
I think he's muted.
Mr. Hernandez, you're muted. I'll start your time.
Okay, my fault. Thank you so much. Sorry about that. I was saying, like, I'm not too familiar with any events or anything like that. Resource fair would be great. A resource information fair would be great. It's something I would kind of get behind also. Another thing, I do know that there's a baseball field right by Mission Stadium for disability children that they can play on. I'm not sure if that league is still going. That's something I most definitely would kind of look into. One thing is I'm a real big sports person. I grew up in San Antonio Parks and Rec, kind of learned there. I would like to see San Antonio Parks and Rec reach out more to disability people with their Spurs League, with all their other fitness in the park activities, kind of make it more inclusive to everyone.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with Ms. Evrata. The question is, what steps do you plan to take in order to make your online campaign page available in simple language, compliant with Wcag 2.1 standards, and fully accessible to screen readers and ASL users, giving all residents access to campaign and election information?
That's a fantastic idea. What I plan to do is to do it. So I think there's no other thing to say other than that. So we can look into that very quickly and we can get that altered. And I have to thank you for informing me that we have that option. So thank you.
Awesome, thank you. We have Mr. Hernandez next.
I don't even have a website, so I guess that's not even probably pertain to me, but any ideas? I'm more off social media. Hopefully I can have a website kind of going pretty soon, but any ideas, I'm open to suggestions. I guess that's on that one.
All right, and Mr. Becker?
Being a speech pathologist and having a child with disabilities, I would hit my sister up, my informal advisor on all these kinds of issues, and see what she knows about it. I don't know that she's any more of a techie than I am, so I'd have to see what she knows about it and see how wide her network reaches, and see if she knows of anybody that can help me out.
Thank you. Our next question is, what do you see as the major factor or factors preventing members of the disability community from achieving economic resiliency? And what actions, if any, would you take to improve economic outcomes for members of the disability community? We will start with Mr. Hernandez.
One of them is transportation, just getting there. You know what I mean? It's hard to get there. It's hard to keep a job. One of the questions, it's hard to keep a job when you can't get there, or also just even try to keep a job when. So can I go back on that one? Education, one of the things on bosses, and kind of having that problem, letting them know that sometimes employees with depression, anxiety, and stuff like that, that this is the reason why they're not coming in. It's not because they don't want to work. It's because they have these issues following them. You know what I mean? And trying to make a better community, I guess, employer, I would kind of say, know that this is the issues that sometimes happens when you do have these mental health issues and disability issues. You know what I mean? Sometimes you don't know what you're going to run into, but try to find that understanding pretty much, as these are, I'm kind of caught up in everything in my head, but making sure education on mental health and then transportation and get to job sites.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Mr. Becker.
I agree with Mr. Hernandez that transportation is a big one. Another barrier to such employment. There's really nothing we can do about federal minimum wage. It puts a floor, and it knocks out the bottom rungs of the ladder for those just trying to get skills. So there's not a lot we can do about that. We have to work around it. I know when in my classes, occasionally I'll get a note from the counselor or a doctor that a student has a certain disability or whatnot, just to let me know it might be necessary to make a little extra accommodation. I would check if local employers get that kind of thing as well. Get some kind of advisory from a doctor or something, and encourage them to take it into consideration and just work with it, because it can be beneficial.
Thank you, Ms. Ebrada.
Would you mind repeating the question again, please?
Yes, of course. One moment. What do you see as the major factor or factors preventing members of the disability community from achieving economic resiliency? And what actions, if any, would you take to improve economic outcomes for members of the disability community?
I think one of the factors is the lack of recognition. I mentioned it earlier. You don't always know when somebody is suffering from a disability. And so a lot of this is education to employers. I think it's really important. We have this workforce development program. Every time we talk about it, I ask about, not only people with physical impairments, but with mental impairments as well. And how are we accommodating what their needs? And so I think a big part of the solution is identifying it and educating, especially not just the city, because we have more control over that, right? But private employers, and engaging them and offering them services like this health fair. We were able to do that. We had invited a lot of private businesses, both big and small, not just the Valeros, but small businesses that you see in a strip mall, come in and understand what people are with disabilities are dealing with, because oftentimes it's very, very helpful to to an employer. It's very helpful to the business. So that's part of the solution is helping to identify.
Thank you. All right, our next question is about education. What steps, if any, would you take to assist families caring for students in special education programs during the pandemic who have found their students without necessary aids and services and are therefore regressing in their development? We will start with Mr. Becker.
Suppose first of all, I'd see if they have any underlying conditions or are immunocompromised. If not, I would encourage them to return to school, which a lot of kids are doing. And if they are, if it's safer for them to stay home, see what kind of services the district has. Because there's been some pitfalls, but do whatever we can to get the equipment that they had when they were at school, get it to their home to the extent it's possible. Just don't try to cut off that gap that a lot of kids unfortunately are experiencing over the last year or so, the education gap.
All right, thank you, Mr. Becker. Next, we'll have Ms. Ebrada.
Thank you. I really think it's engaging our nonprofits. All children, I think, are unfortunately suffering from that slide, but our disabled children especially, because they don't have access to those services. The city has delegate agencies and nonprofits that we help fund, And for me, it's funding of those nonprofits, helping them get out into the neighborhoods, get them out to the houses, into where the children are, and help them, engage them one-on-one, like they have those services at school. So, I mean, there are things the city can do. We can help fund the nonprofits. We can help those nonprofits to grow, to be able to get out into the community even more. There's nothing like being, I think, in the special education program every day, but any gaps that we can fill with the city would be helpful.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Hernandez.
The learning gap, I think, is not just a disability issue. I think it's an issue for all our children in the city. One of the things I do kind of would push for is to citywide broadband. So kind of bridge that digital divide. Kind of our infrastructure needs to kind of get better. Also another thing, team up with nonprofits. I believe nonprofits are the expertise in their field, and the city should not be trying to reinvent the wheel. Let's go to these nonprofits who already have the networks, the education, and the know-how to get that education out there. And as the councilwoman said, fund these programs as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next question. Do you think something more should have been done to educate the community about the ADA accommodations for wearing masks, as well as the communication barriers that masks cause for a number of individuals with disabilities in our community? If yes, what will you do differently during the next emergency response to ensure people with disabilities aren't inadvertently harmed? We will start with Ms. Efrata.
Thank you. It reminds me of the license plate issue, you know, where if you have a certain impairment, the license plate will let the officer know if they pull you over. You know, now there, I mean, maybe it's as little as an emblem on that you wear, you know, if you decide to, right? So that if you're not wearing your mask because you need accommodations for that, people don't approach you. People aren't in your business, you know, and letting you do what you need to do. It's a matter, I think, if you want it, of course, if you're able to self-identify, you want to self-identify. But I think it's just a matter of, again, a public campaign, you know, understanding what the symbol is and recognizing it, and then, you know, backing off, letting that person do what they need to do. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Mr. Hernandez?
So I don't think the city got the kind of, when the whole shutdown happened, I don't think the information out there was reliable, and it was just kind of a lot of information coming from different directions. I would love to see next time, if anything does happen like that, a more centralized education or more centralized way to get word out of what's going on, what rules and what's needed. How to kind of assist that way, I do not know. One of the things I'm struggling with this form, especially, is that I do not know much about disability, honestly, but I'm here to learn. And I think people who are living with disabilities, people that are championing these causes, are our experts, and those are the people I would bring to the table to help me get to that part, to kind of fix the situation that we had at the beginning of the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Becker?
This question was about identifying those with disabilities that might not be able to wear a mask, or like the rest of us. Is that it?
So I can reread the question to you as well, but it's more so about in future emergency situations, how to handle those. One moment, let me locate it. All right. Do you think something more should have been done to educate the community about the ADA accommodations for wearing masks, as well as the communication barriers that masks cause for a number of individuals with disabilities in our community? If yes, what will you do differently during the next emergency response to ensure people with disabilities are not inadvertently harmed?
Yeah, a public campaign. I like the councilwoman's idea about a little symbol, should the person want that. But just along with the rest of the public information campaign about the whole pandemic. Throw in something mentioning that to respect those that may have issues complying with the mask, and to look for an identifier for these masks for people that do have disabilities.
Thank you.
I think you're muted, Gracie. Sorry.
Thank you. This will be our second to last question. All right, what steps will you take to create access for people with disabilities to share information about their needs and concerns with you and your office? We will begin with Mr. Hernandez.
Open door policy. My emails out there. Just open door policy. I mean, and I personally need to learn how to communicate with people with disabilities, in the sense like hard of hearing, people with bad eyesight. I know Definitely is there. That's one of the communications I do kind of use at work when I'm working with people with disabilities, but I just need a little bit more information, but I'm open to any option.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Becker.
Try to have a couple of folks in my network at my disposal, for lack of better words, that can help me out in understanding, setting up a way that folks with disabilities can get in touch with me as easily as somebody that doesn't have a disability.
Okay, Ms. Havrata.
Thank you. About a year ago, I would say I had a council consideration request, a CCR, for increased transparency with the city by putting up a messaging board. So it would be online, but it would be accessible, of course, through my city council office to anybody that wanted to see it, not just online, but print it up. So where any questions that I ask the city, even like we can email the city and they email us back, but you don't know the answer to that question because it's in my email. So that would all be transparent. So that's really important to me, so that everybody could see it. But anybody that calls, messages, comes by my office would have access to that as well. And you know, the office has been closed except for appointment during the pandemic. But I really shouldn't say that, because we have been totally open. We just had to be closed. You know, the city kind of wanted us to be, but we have been totally open. We've been taking calls, and I'm really grateful to say, especially with a lot of our disabled community and our seniors, that they have taken advantage of kind of more one-on-one opportunities, because the door isn't, you know, literally, you know, it's locked, unfortunately. But it's really something that if we were to able to show that transparency and then we could provide that to the community, I think would be incredible.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So this is our final question. Instead of posing a question, we're going to give you each about a minute to either go back to a question we asked earlier or expand on a topic of your choosing. And we will start with Mr. Becker.
Oh boy. You know, I think a lot of this is just like treating anybody. It's just a matter of respect, and especially a little more understanding is necessary here, especially for those whose disability isn't outwardly obvious and the hard of hearing. But also sometimes I had a roommate just out of college that was legally blind. You know, he could see shades, but not exact figures. So you really couldn't tell that he was blind until he told you that's why he didn't drive. Just extending respect to people, just like you would anybody else, but a little more understanding that, you know, that some, you know, like Mr. Hernandez brought up a good example earlier, that if you're trying to talk to somebody and their back is turned to you, they may not be ignoring you. They may not just be able to hear you. Just a little more understanding, a little bit more tolerance, for lack of better words.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll have Ms. Havrata.
Thank you. For me, it's really about acknowledging, and I'm not going back to a specific question, by the way, I'm just speaking generally, acknowledging and celebrating our disabled community within the entire population. This really, to me, it goes back to creating more awareness in our city about the disabled community and the diversity and special skills that they can provide. There are real impairments out there. You know, it is true. We're all the same at heart, but we're not all the same. You know, we have to, everybody is dealing with different issues, different challenges. And where we need to work on is developing better standards really for the city and the community that will allow people a competitive chance, all people, but including the disabled community, a competitive chance at success. I'm grateful today. I've taken some notes, you know, about adding the disability question on surveys. That's something that's easily changed. And then adding my campaign page, adding accommodations to my campaign page. So I thank you for bringing those to my awareness. Somebody who deals with, you know, this disabled community every day. And those are two things that I can change very easily. So I'm thankful for the opportunity to be with you here tonight. And thank you for the opportunity to learn. So I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. And finally, we'll end with Mr. Hernandez.
So I'm not gonna pretend like I know everything about disability community because I don't, and that's why one of the reasons I'm here. I'm reaching out to y'all so you can educate me about y'all's needs and y'all's wants. This is why I'm here. This is why I'm running for office, to help my community be better. San Antonio is one of the most compassionate cities in the world, and I think that if we can have somebody in office that is compassionate and forward-looking, that we can make this the most diverse and best city in the country. My main things are COVID recovery, housing, from standpoint of disabled housing, living off SSDI, which is like $780 a month, if that, to getting affordable housing for those individuals, to even access to those housing. How am I going to go on the bus route? How am I going to get to the bus route if I don't have a sidewalk? Those are what I'm running on to make this community better. I will have an open door policy. One of the things that I always do, if I see a gap, I try to learn. I act like I don't know everything. And so I'm willing to ask, and I will ask a lot of questions to get the education that I need to get on these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us today. We ended a little bit early, but we don't quite have enough time before the end of this session. I'm going to end the recording right now.